shall now allow debate on the Executive Committee report. Members who wish to debate shall indicate by showing of hands, and members will be allowed to debate for a maximum period of 5 minutes. But I'm aware that the Speaker of Zimbabwe wanted to say something. Whatever it is, it will be considered as part of your contribution to this report. Honorable Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable President. Item 435.
Of the executive report?
On the, of the report.
Yeah, executive report.
Executive report. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The 5th line of the first paragraph under 435 should read Plenary Assembly. He had met with President Mugabe on Saturday, the 20th June 2015, and he had briefly updated him on the SADC-PF transformation based on the concept paper on the transformation of SADC into a SADC regional parliament. The question of dates there, the rest should be fine. If you may allow me, Mr. President, I thought under the report, the ESCO did resolve that there be an ad hoc committee to look at the ways and means of improving the liquidity of the forum. And that has not been mentioned either under the ESCO report or the Treasurer's report. I thought that was an important decision. Thank you, Mr. President.
Yes, what I noticed is that the others are typos, but maybe the date is worth noting, that the date is not 1 July, Wednesday 1 July, and what the Speaker said. That will be taken into consideration as we pose the last question in adopting this report. Seychelles.
Thank you, Mr. President. It's simply an added comment. If I may take the House to page 5.438. Here is reported that the Cabinet approved the proposal, but may we also take note of the fact that the National Assembly of Seychelles also, through a motion, unanimously approved the transformation of SADC-PF. I thank you.
Well, that's good news. We thank you. That is enriching the report. This is Botswana. Then after Botswana, I notice Honorable Gomez, Zimbabwe. Botswana for now.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mine is on page 10, the second paragraph, where it talks about the Parliament's budgeting for the standing committees, for 2 meetings for the SADC-PF standing committees. I want to clarify, the ESCO Executive Committee to clarify if this is to be taken back to Parliament, and if this doesn't increase the contribution of member parliaments, because I understand there was an increase in the last forum where we did not attend because of the elections. Now, we are talking about Parliament budgeting for the standing committees. Just want the committee to clarify to us that isn't it another expense for Parliament? And again, doesn't it going to defeat the spirit of us as SADC-PF asking for independence of us being regional parliament, that we cannot sustain our being? Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Yeah, the mover is taking note of those sentiments. Now I'll get to Zimbabwe. After Zimbabwe, Angola. Then I'll come back to you, Honorable Speaker. Let's have Zimbabwe for now.
Okay, thank you very much, Honorable President. The name is Innocent Gonese, Member of Parliament from Zimbabwe. My comment is on item 434, relating to the reiteration by President Khama that there's a need for us to make a follow-up on the requisite procedure to ensure that the matter is put on the agenda. I think in the past, that has always been the problem, that we get all the encouraging signs of support. But when it comes to the actual summit, the problem has been that the item has been missing from the agenda. Perhaps on a lighter note, I will, I think, endorse the call from my colleague that perhaps we need to ask the speaker, the Honorable Speaker from South Africa, to direct us to the Sangoma so that we ensure that the matter is indeed on the agenda. But anyway, on a serious note, perhaps the executive committee could indicate to us, I am happy also to note that Dr. Stegomena Tax was part of the delegation, and I hope that because she is supportive, this will result in the matter being indeed on the agenda. And I know that the summit is going to be held very soon in Botswana, and perhaps if we could be appraised whether there has been sufficient progress, and if we can really be confident that this time the matter will be deliberated upon, and if we could just get some more information on that.
Thank you. I hope the Speaker of South Africa will consult the mover and see how you can respond to that. I will now recognize Angola. After Angola, Swaziland, Speaker of Swaziland in that order.
Muito obrigado, Sr. Presidente. Sr. Secretário-Geral, a nossa questão tem a ver com o documento em português. No ponto 436, relativamente à África do Sul, ao contrário do que se refere ao Lesotho e às Seychelles, que apoiam incondicionalmente o aparecimento ou a transformação do Fórum em Parlamento Regional. Aqui na posição 4, no ponto 436, relativamente à África do Sul, apenas se diz que a África do Sul apresentou uma resolução. Não diz que resolução é. Se é a favor, se é contra. Os documentos têm a força que têm. As palavras o vento leva e nós precisamos de ter isto. É apenas uma questão de precisão, porque na versão em português não se refere efetivamente que resolução é que a África do Sul apresentou. Apenas esta pontualização. Nós estamos de acordo com o texto total, digamos, do relatório. Esqueci-me de apresentar-me também, peço desculpas, eu sou o deputado Pedro Sebastião, da delegação de Angola. Muito obrigado.
Although the chair is not supposed to be engaged in debate, but I thought the resolution was an internal matter in South African Parliament, but the move, I'll take note of that. Now I'll recognize Speaker of Swaziland.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to go to page 10 of this report. Mr. President, I have a serious concern about the way the programs of the forums are financed. In most cases, you find that when a committee needs to meet, do the work of the forum, the Secretary General has to go around scout for funds. Then my question, which bothers me, is that what is the work of this 17+ million which is paid annually by members? Can't that money be structured in such a way that it includes the work of the committee of the forum? Is there a need to really just to go out and scout for funds simple for a committee work? So I'm worried, President, that such an organization which is advancing to be a regional parliament, but it seems our contribution to this forum, whether it is the way the budget is formed, or somehow we don't know how to account for the 17 million. Why are we taking now the committees to be financed by national parliaments? That is the work, that is the program of the Secretariat or of the forum. Why now it is pushed to national parliaments, yet we are paying so much in subscriptions? That is my worry, Mr. President. Maybe I'll get some clarification on those concerns. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll now recognize Namibia at the far end there. And after Namibia, Zimbabwe again. Namibia, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. My name is Sebastian Karupu, Member of Parliament from Namibia. I've got 3 items that were extensively deliberated on at the Executive Committee. And before I go to these 3 items, I would like to request the Secretariat to make a correction on my first name. Sebastian, there is an omission of an I between T and the first A. There should be an I, Sebastian. Coming back to the 3 items. In the Executive Committee, we deliberated on items like status on the contribution for the purchase of the residential house for the Secretary General, which was item number 5.0 on page 5 of the report that was presented to us. And on the same page, item number 6, it was also deliberated on item on the establishment of a SADC Parliamentary Studies Institute. And then my last contribution is item number 3, is the funding of the election observers. That was also extensively deliberated on. And I'm failing to get it in this report that is now presented to us for adoption as to what was resolved and what was recommended to this plenary. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Okay, Zimbabwe, Honorable Matswangwa, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to take the House back to 4.35 on the proposed courtesy calls. As much as the lobbying delegation to meet the President of Zimbabwe is now directed to him because of the fact that he is the SADC chairperson, I just want to humbly inform this House that in 2010, the SADC-PF put up a delegation of speakers who went to see the President of Zimbabwe, and they were pleasantly surprised or happy that the President was truly for SADC-PF being transformed into a SADC-PF, a SADC regional parliament. The same delegation visited also, I happen to have been part of that delegation, visited also President Zuma, who was equally very supportive. And like what Lesotho has just said, that there is a lot of support from all these executive presidents of SADC. What is really needed and what the executive may want to concentrate on maybe is lobbying visits to the Council of Ministers of SADC, so that this agenda is put on the agenda of the summit. I thank you.
The mover is taking note of that. I will now have Speaker of Lesotho. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. I merely wanted to confirm the support of Lesotho to the establishment of a regional parliament. When the idea of the transformation of the SADC Parliamentary Forum into a regional parliament was mooted, I was already the Speaker of the National Assembly of Lesotho, and the current Prime Minister was Prime Minister then. And I used to brief him regularly about the activities of the forum, and as speakers, we were given a very clear mandate by the forum to lobby our heads of state and government on the transformation of the forum into a SADC parliament. And I carried out this mandate very well. When we hosted the SADC Parliamentary Forum Assembly in 2003, the Prime Minister pledged his unwavering support for the establishment of the regional parliament. And he pleaded with my colleagues then to do their homeworks in their respective countries, because he said his worry was that he could tell that his colleagues were not quite conversant with this idea of the establishment of the regional parliament. This is why when we were requested to set up an appointment again for the lobby mission to go to Lesotho, really, we told the forum that there was no need because the Prime Minister has not changed his mind about the establishment of the SADC Parliament. So I think what we all need to do, really, is to talk to our principals back home, because we don't need to buy the air tickets to see our heads of state and government. Besides, as colleagues have mentioned this over and over again, the speakers were requested to go around not only to talk to their presidents or prime ministers, but to go around lobbying for the support. And we received quite positive response from most of our heads of state, or maybe it's nearly everyone now, according to the reports that have been forthcoming. So probably what we need to polish up, because we're also advised on this one, is the modalities of putting this on the agenda of the summit, because I think we were offered an advice during the plenary assembly that took place in Lesotho by some of our colleagues who happened to have been in cabinet before, especially the former ministers of foreign affairs were quite helpful on this one. That's when I learned that it was quite tricky to have issues on the agenda of the SADC summit. So I think we need to polish up that area as well, so that this could be could be pushed on the agenda of the summit. I thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. I now recognize Malawi, head of delegation from Malawi.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I think I would like really to concur with the previous contributor that indicated that from now onwards, maybe our focus should be to have this issue on the agenda of the summit of the heads of states. Because it seems to me that pretty much more than half of the countries are in support of this, and it would be wise that a modality be explored as to how the issue can basically be on the agenda at such a summit. Another contributor indicated that maybe the best way would be to consult ministers to ensure that they put this on the agenda. Maybe the Secretariat would do us a favor in trying to find out what would be the best way to really push this to be on the agenda. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Honorable members, honorable presiding officers, our rules are silent. Oh, South Africa, speak of South Africa. Then after that, Namibia. I was almost going to ask the House to go for a break. But let's have South Africa followed by Namibia. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. Honorable President, I'll leave the matter of South Africa's position to the mover. But I'd like to perhaps follow up on the last two speakers. The sum of what Speaker of Lesotho said that I missed because I was busy looking at some relevant documentation for the present discussion. But my observation as a person who was around, say, in the debates of this matter about 10 years ago, and I was away from the parliamentary space and I have just come back, I observe that there are developments. We have moved. Even in terms of individual leaders who are supporting, you can tell that so-and-so was a bit difficult then, but is actually fully on board now. I remember that there are heads of states that have been, there are countries that have been visited more than once. In terms of a previous head of state, and I know that President Mbeki then met a delegation which I accompanied, led by the then Speaker Mwana Mwamba. And he fully supported us and even whispered to us where the problem lay, which he couldn't say in public, but he sensitized us. So what I see now, one is support from the Executive Secretariat in Gaborone, which was not there before, to a point where at the end of the meeting with President Khama, he asked the question, after having dealt with many other questions he had raised just to help us to enhance our document. He asked the question, now how do we get the item on the agenda of the August summit? And we got a response from the Executive Secretary, Dr. Tex. And she advised, among other things, that the ministers of justice and constitutional affairs in certain instances, their portfolios would be. And the Council of Ministers, Ministers of Foreign Affairs, were critical on ensuring the item would be on the agenda, because it's the Council of Ministers that would give the heads of states and motivate for the agenda. So it was critical for us to have those on board. And so apart from pursuing a list of further heads of states to visit, if possible, before August, there was also the issue of making sure that by the time the ministers of justice go to their own meeting, we get hold of them, brief them, make sure that they were fully on board on all areas. I've done that for South Africa, but the Minister of Justice was not well. But he was, at least, he appreciated, he sent a message that he appreciated the message from me. We are still trying to make sure that we talk to him eye to eye. The same with the Minister of Foreign Affairs, international relations and cooperation. You've got to make sure to the last day before they get into the meeting in August, they are fully on board. They are fully, President Zuma asked us on Sunday, have you done your homework on the ground? Have you done, you can't see one person or two people and you think you've finished. You must keep on board. You must keep them on board, keep them committed, because they are also looking around and they're listening. What are the others saying? If they are not hearing any sound from others, they think, this thing doesn't seem to be moving. So I really suggest that we go to these two ministries and watch when the ministers of justice are going to be meeting under the chairmanship of Minister Mnangagwa of Zimbabwe. I thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much. I now recognize Speaker of Namibia.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I just wanted to reflect briefly on the last few comments by colleagues, simply to say, generally speaking, I think there is a momentum building up in support of the transformation for a regional parliament. But this requires us to double up our efforts to maintain the momentum, to come out in a very positive way. For instance, the outcome of this very plenary assembly would also help us to send the right kind of message in a very positive way, so that those who are still holding back can be influenced by the fact that there is a build-up in support of the transformation of the SADC Parliamentary Forum. One important area where there's always going to be people who are going to be, spectacle, some reservation, is the area of cost effectiveness. Do we have the situation under control? Are we in a position to mobilize resources so that we can sustain our various programs? And I think we need to come out better in that area of accountability, transparency, that the resources that we have are properly being utilized, because people will be having some reservation in terms, are we going to be made to pay more? And as a hosting country, we are saying in Namibia that we are committed to do our very best to provide the premises, to do whatever is required. But of course, that cannot be left to us. The contribution from individual member countries timely are important. And I think we need, if we say we value the role of regional parliament, we also have to make sure that it is properly sustained and provided the resources so that our men and women who served us in the regional parliament are able to do their work. So all those things must go hand in hand. So, Mr. President, I also want to underline the fact that our main Minister of Justice has undertaken the responsibility to talk to his colleagues and is completely committed to make sure that this item serves at that important meeting so that we can actually get the ball rolling. Thank you.
Thank you very much, honourable members. Lesotho, you want to come back? I was almost, yeah, okay, Lesotho.
Just quick comments, Honourable President. I'm also following up on what the colleague from Namibia has just said.
Yes.
I'm not familiar, or I'm actually not in the picture or ignorant about how the business is conducted in the summit. But I'm quite aware that the heads of state do not want to commit themselves on this agenda by moving or proposing the establishment of the SADC Parliament. This was raised in some of the consultations that we held in the past. So I think as we work out how this could be pushed forward, we should also not leave this behind, that probably the challenge could be who's going to move that the SADC Parliamentary Forum be transformed into a SADC Parliament. I was reminded of this when I saw one line in the minutes as we're in the meeting of the executive committee, that Zimbabwe, even though it is agreeable or also supporting the transformation into a regional parliament, there's somewhere where there was a mention that, however, this should not be seen as the initiative of Zimbabwe. So this reminded me of this technicality. So I don't know how we are going to move around it so that we sort of come to a solution to this problem. Another problem that we have, Chairperson, is hosting of the Pan-African Parliament by the region, because I understand in some of the meetings of the summit, the heads of state could not understand why we are pushing for the establishment of a SADC Parliament while there's already a Pan-African Parliament. So I think hosting it in our region really is working or has worked against us somehow. And another question which has always come up in the deliberations of this exercise is the question of resources. So I thought I should raise these issues, Chairperson, so that when we are working out how to push our agenda forward, we should take them along. Thank you.
Thank you. Those are points of food of thought. Honorable members, the House will continue debating after break. We shall now take a 30 minutes break and resume at 11:20. The House is suspended.
Justice Patrick Matibini, that an effective engagement has now been established between the SADC Parliamentary Forum Secretariat and the SADC Secretariat in Botswana. And also, it does not take away the fact, in agreeing with Professor Kajivivi, that momentum is showing that there's positive drift in realizing the idea of transformation of our organization into a parliament. This also feeds into what I thought was an answer from Speaker Mbete when she said that everyone must be carried on board. And for this particular item to see the light of day at the agenda of the Heads of States Summit, you will see that in our report, for the first time, we are promoting a full engagement of councils, or Council of Ministers of Justice or Constitutional Affairs, depending on which jurisdiction, as well as attorneys generals of, because they're the ones who are charged with the responsibility of advising heads of state. And for as long as they do not get the appreciation of what it is we are trying to do, even if the matter is placed on the agenda, I think that the tragedy would be to see it on the agenda and then it fails to see the light of day thereafter, meaning if it is shut down. So I think effective engagement has to be done at all stages with all stakeholders and all players. Again, I want to just take note of the comment from Mozambique about the issue of contribution that their country, and so I think the same applies to Lesotho, although she hasn't rose to say it, coincided with the elections, and that's what has formed the delay in making their annual subscriptions. South Africa, I think that you could not be any more right than you have stated it, that it's important to make timely payments, but I think we'll be shooting a dead horse to continue speaking about the matter. I think everybody is aware. Mr. President, while I have the floor, I think there's something wrong with the air conditioning system. And maybe
I think Secretariat is attending to that.
Thank you. Thank you very much. The status of willingness to transform is an issue that South Africa raised. I think that Secretary General can furnish that information. But I think that it's important to know that over years, heads of state have all shown willingness to transform. At individual levels, they have all shown willingness. It is about doing to take the right steps to achieve that which we are dreaming of. And finally, I think I've already addressed the issue that Honorable Dr. Justice Matibini raised about investing time in engagement between our Secretariat and the colleagues in Gaborone, the SADC Secretariat. Mr. President, let me thank you for the opportunity of raising this motion, and also thank the members, hoping that they will give it a mark seal of approval and adopt the EXCO report, which also includes the Treasurer's report. I beg to move.
Botswana, you have an additional point?
Sorry, Mr. Chairman. When I look into this paragraph, if I may be allowed to read it, concerning the issue of standing committees being budgeted by member states. In order to ensure sustainability of holding standing committees outside the Plenary Assembly, the committee adopted the recommendation by the Secretary General for National Parliament to consider budgeting the two. My question is that, are we still, if we approve this minute, are we committing ourselves as a member state, or we are still going to consult our parliament? Because it's necessary for us not to say we agree as delegates. is to say, because I'm looking at how it reads, is to say we are still going to consult. Because I said, my concern is that if we budget for the standing committees for our SADC parliamentary forum, it's ours, but it will mean that we increase the subscription of our member parliaments. So if it's what we are saying, I think we rather agree that we consider and consult back, to consult our parliaments back. Because if we agree now, maybe they are not going to agree as members because we are representing people here. I don't know, but my opinion is that if it's like this, because it means that parliament should increase.
Treasurer, you want to come back? But Honorable Speaker, you are here to make certain decisions on behalf of your country. And this is, you are trusted to do that.
No,
but can I ask the Treasurer to respond to this particular issue? What does it mean? What are you saying on that particular point? Treasurer?
Maybe before I respond, I should take a set of the concerns, because I saw that there are a few hands, and then we can agree to settle on one position.
I did not notice any other. Zambia, you want to say something? Oh, Swaziland. Can I recognize Swaziland? You have the floor.
Thank you, Honorable President. I think the response from the Treasurer is not satisfactory when he says it was because they did not put the budget for committees when this plenary approved the budget. The question would be, why didn't you put it? Because working of the committees is a major activity of this organization. So you can't just put it aside and you push another issues and then you come and say it's because it was not in the budget. That is not acceptable. Who makes the budget? Thank you.
Zimbabwe, Honorable Goni.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, it's Innocent Gonese from Zimbabwe. Thank you very much, Honorable President. I think that let's look at this matter in context. In the past, our standing committees would meet during the plenary. And when you look at that historical background, then when we said that we would operate like a parliament, we then agreed that, it would be preferable to have a situation where our committees will meet outside. And I think that I want to commend the Secretariat for the efforts that they have made in getting assistance for some of the committees to actually meet. And I think that going forward, it is really incumbent upon us, not just the Treasurer, but for us to come to a decision, because obviously there are implications. If we are to continue having the committees meeting outside the plenary sessions, it then means that there's an additional cost. And perhaps our contributions did not factor or take this into account. And what it means, therefore, is that if we don't continue getting outside funding, it would then become very problematic. And I want to align my contribution to the cost fears which we have, or at least which has been an indication that on the part of some of the heads of state, it is a matter of concern to them that if we transform into a regional parliament, that might actually increase the costs. And as we debate and deliberate on this issue, I think we must have it at the back of our minds. Obviously, I am cognizant of the concerns raised by Botswana, that if we actually say that we should then consider having national parliaments budgeting for it, it can come in one of two ways. One would be that when the standing committees are to meet outside the core budget of the forum, we may then have a situation where there's a direct contribution from member parliaments to ensure that the committees do meet. And that is obviously predicated on the assumption that we would not have been able to secure outside budgetary support as we did. So I think that we must really understand the matters in that context. And that going forward, if we are to say that we factor in the cost of the standing committee meeting outside the plenary sessions, it might mean an increase in contributions, and that is a bullet that we might have to bite. And I just wanted to perhaps put that into perspective so that we are all of the same mind and of the same understanding.
Thank you. Additional comments? But the point is, any budget is subject to review. Any budget. There are always, certain dynamics which take place. Could be economical dynamics or change of planning. So there's nothing wrong in reviewing a budget. Would I allow South Africa to take the floor?
Thank you, Mr. President. Presently in our country, we are going through a process whereby all of us have been asked to do what the Ministry of Finance calls haircuts. So everyone must reconsider what they are doing and must not do anything that is avoidable to increase spending on the resources we have as a country. Obviously, we must prioritize. Secondly, for the past few days in our meetings, whether executive committee meeting or any other structure, I've got a strong sense of, in particular, colleagues from smaller economies in the way they put it, really requesting that we shouldn't or we should avoid requiring their parliaments to have to yet again fork out more money. And I think it would be uncomfortable that we would require them to have to come back again and again on that point. And I do think it's a valid point. If you are saying we did in the past hold our committees as part of the mainstream work that is being done by this body, which all our parliaments do. Of course, we do, apportion time either just before we start having plenary sittings or just after. They remain at the venue of Parliament and continue to do the work because you want to avoid the travel bill increasing the amount of money you must budget. Now, my question is, was it unavoidable for us to go this direction of let's hold committee meetings outside? Maybe the SG who's arriving just at the right time might explain to us why we decided to leave the previous way of doing things. Because indeed, while we are around, why couldn't we plan for committees to be meeting in one or other of the days in terms of a morning or an afternoon? Just plan for committees to meet. I'm seeking for clarity because I don't remember that I was there when the decision was taken to leave the past practice and to start meeting outside, because anything that will increase the budget of any parliament, I think, should be avoided.
Yeah, Treasurer will respond to this because SG has no voice in this house. I will allow Lesotho, but I thought I saw Seychelles. Sigoli, were you trying to raise your hand? Seychelles? Seychelles. Speaker of Seychelles. I thought I saw your hand. Okay. Then I'll give the floor to Lesotho.
I'll make a very brief comment, Honorable President. I'm actually offering to give an institutional memory here. When the subscriptions were 800,000, the mandatory annual subscriptions, we started feeling the financial strain. And at that time, a decision was taken that the forum should streamline its programs so that it remains with the core activities, with only the core activities. And again, it was strongly recommended that the forum should live within its means in order to avoid by all means increasing the annual subscriptions. I'm surprised that 2.5 years later, the annual subscriptions have increased so much, and over and above that, we are expected as member parliaments to continue increasing the cost into the annual subscriptions. Because even though this was not spoken at length this morning, I know that we were told in the meeting that there is an intention now to make it mandatory for member parliaments to incorporate the cost of election observation into the annual subscriptions. And it is not only that, it is also the question of the committees to be budgeted by member parliaments so that they can sit outside the plenary assembly. And we still have to pay for the house of the Secretary General. This is something that really member parliaments cannot afford. As the Speaker has said, some of us come from small countries with smaller economies. We are struggling, barely struggling, to survive. We are confronted with very serious challenges of high rates of unemployment, poverty, soaring, diseases. You know that Lesotho has now moved to number 2 in terms of HIV and AIDS. And we seriously have, to find ways and means of surviving. And the forum has become too expensive for us, and it's actually unaffordable.
Yeah, Treasurer, now you can respond to those issues. I'm sure you have taken note of everything.
Thank you very much once again. And thank you, all of you who have intervened. I think the way to put this is to say that most of what we are grappling with right now has been decisions that were made by resolution of this same plenary assembly. I think that should be the beginning point. Secondly, it should be understood that the spirit within which this ad hoc committee was constituted, and I'm glad that the Speaker from Lesotho is a member of this ad hoc committee, was constituted in the spirit of recognizing these hardships. Having said so, and also addressing the issue from Honorable Speaker from Swaziland, although Honorable Gonese, I think, put it in a much better way because he's a lawyer and I'm not, that transformation always has teething problems. I do recall that in Mauritius, even just to get a meeting started was a problem. Of course, there were issues that we had to deal with. And I want to say to this plenary assembly that the issue of holding committee meetings during plenary, the way that we looked at it at that time was that a plenary engagement such as this would probably take not less than 12 days. And the issue of now having the meetings outside plenary came midway through a budget cycle. Fortunately, AWEPA came to our aid and funded this. Now, recognizing, first of all, in order for this meeting to move forward, a question from Botswana came to say, are we now making another resolution that will be binding? I think my proposal would be that please allow the work of the ad hoc committee to take place, hopefully this evening, and allow us to report back on what innovations we think we can come with to deal with the issue of what has already happened, namely the increase of subscription fees in order to cover elections observation. That is already on the budget now. The 1.340 increment from 1.1, if I recall, and I stand to be corrected, was partially to deal with the issue of elections observation, because we recognize that democratization is part of our core business as a forum. And we thought that what happened in the case of South Africa, South African elections, where we failed as a grouping to monitor what was going on because of lack of finance, should not repeat itself. But I think that nothing is cast in stone. I'm proposing now, Mr. President, so that this meeting can move forward, that maybe we suspend this executive committee's suggestion that member parliaments should budget for committee work until we come back to you tomorrow. And we hope that we can be innovative enough to find ways and means of accommodating these particular committee engagements within the budget. This is what I would propose. And hoping that I've attended to... Okay, there's one more thing that Honorable Speaker Mbete said regarding the sizes of economies. Again, institutional memory, I'm fortunate to have it, tells me that we did attempt, and I'm sure, Honorable Msamai, you do recall, that there was an attempt for member states to pay their contributions based on the GDP size. That is the model that the SADC in Gaborone has taken. That's how they contribute their membership, by the size of the GDP. What came to play at that time was that it will affect the voice of those parliaments whose GDPs are smaller. And so that everyone has an equal voice, it was again a resolution of this plenary assembly that everyone should pay the same amount of money. But those are resolutions that can be revisited if the plenary so wishes, and not for me, who is unfortunate to be holding the position of treasurer at this particular point, to chart a way forward. I think that has been attempted before, but it presented a challenge to say, look, those countries that have bigger economies, such as the country we are sitting in today, will have more muscle than the other countries that are contributing less. I thought I should put that, and maybe as the ad hoc committee sits, it's one of the issues that we can look at, and hoping that we can come with these innovations in order for us to now arrive back at the same page. So ultimately, I'm proposing that this particular recommendation from EXCO be suspended until the ad hoc committee has done its work. I beg to move.
Well, Honorable Treasurer, as you are rightly putting it, it means the adoption of your report will have to be deferred at this point in time until you furnish the House with the information requested. And you would have to look at this business tomorrow. Yeah?
For this work not to be exclusive to the ad hoc committee, I think we are inviting suggestions so that you take ownership of whatever we are going to come up with, by way of maybe just putting a note to us to say this is what you think we should do around the issue of committees and all the other issues that are incidental to the foregoing.
Yeah, Treasurer, your committee will make necessary consultations. You know which members have raised which issues, and you should come up with the answers tomorrow. It shouldn't be a problem. You cannot receive suggestions from all of us, from the whole House. There are some specific, especially you can take advantage of the institutional memory of the Speaker of Lesotho and others. You consult, you sit down and furnish the House with adequate information. On that point, Honorable House, I now ask the SG to read the second order of the day.
Notice of motion for the adoption of the report of the Standing Committee on Democratization, Governance and Human Rights.
Notice of motion for the adoption of the report of the Standing Committee on Democratization, Governance and Human Rights by Honorable Agnes Limbo. Honorable Limbo.
Mr. President, the Standing Committee on Democratization, Governance and Human Rights, guided by its mandate in terms of Rule 41D of the Rule for Procedures, convened its meeting on Monday the 11th and Tuesday the 12th May 2015 at Midgard Country Estate in Namibia.
Thank you. Any seconder? Yes, Zimbabwe again.
Thank you, Mr. President. My name is Dr. Samson Mukanduri. I second to move the motion, Mr. President. Thank you.
Fine.